Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to the Wombo Combo, a Dota 2 competitive podcast debuting our very first episode, and excited to be here. First, let's introduce ourselves. I'm BreakyCPK, joined by my co-host, the one and only BSJ. How's it going, man?
It's going good. I'm excited. This is my first ever podcast, so
yeah,
quite kind of nervous, not really. Like I've talked on camera. It's amazing. It's kind of like when you go to TI, like you talked on camera all this time, and then you kind of just when you're on for the first time. So I got a little bit of the jitters of, even though I've done this whole high webcam, high viewers thing.
Yeah.
Should be a unique experience, so I'm looking forward to it.
It should be fun, and that is really interesting to hear. I mean, yeah, I've done a broadcast myself, but there are some, you definitely get the nerves going initially, but once you get into it, hopefully pretty good. I mean, for somebody that streams in front of thousands of viewers though, like yourself, it's almost a little surprising to hear. But
you'd be surprised. I guess I've always been somebody that's had nervous energy, so
that's fair.
Like for whatever reason, something that I've just never done before, even if it seems to the other people that it would be the exact same.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, my body manages to make it not the same. So
for what it's worth, I think you did pretty good at TI9. So
I appreciate it.
Anyways, this podcast, the Wombo Combo, as we're calling it, it's focused on competitive Dota 2. That's the plan. It's going to be a weekly podcast. Now, it's an interesting start because normally we do want to have the show on Mondays, live at 5 p.m. Eastern, so the same time. But usually on Mondays, however, for our first episode, because of just to be clear about it, yesterday I was actually casting 12 hours of Dota 2. So I was pretty busy. Originally, we were planning to debut it yesterday, but it came to a point where to make it work, we had to debut it today. But normally the show is going to be every Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern. So today, a little bit different, but just to be clear on what's going on here. But we're here to talk about competitive Dota 2, the week that was, and also obviously preview the week that is. It's ideally going to be a weekly show, so hopefully you guys are ready for some great content, both on the Twitch side, but also on iTunes as well as Spotify and all the podcast platforms there. So that is the point of the show. It's going to be about a 45-minute show or so, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. We're trying to keep it, some content in there, the good juicy stuff, and not overdo it here. But that is the plan. So, BSJ, are you ready to talk about some Dota 2?
Let's go, man. Let's dive into it.
Let's dive into it. Of course, the DPC season just around the corner, going to be starting. Before we get into that, though, in our opinions, I wanted to start with, what I think makes the most sense. TI9 finishing. Naturally, we have what is basically a roster shuffle is the term that's used, and there's a lot of roster changes that take place. There are some that don't take place, some teams that do certainly stick together, but I figured it makes sense to kind of talk about some of the players in these new teams that are evolving or kind of coming about as a result of the roster shuffle and give our take. So I want to start at the top. We got a team known as Evil Geniuses, and a team that is certainly, how do you put it? I don't want to say they've been disappointing because they've overall been the best NA team from year after year, but in the terms of what they expect and the roster that they have had, to some people, it maybe has been disappointing, I think it's fair to say. So they changed things up. They removed Sumail from the roster. They bring in Ramses, formerly of Virtus Pro, of course, and S4, also no longer part of the team. Instead, Abed also replacing. So I guess it's going to be Abed, though, in the mid now, and Ramses actually going to position 3. So that itself is interesting. But first things first, when you heard the news about Sumail specifically no longer part of EG and this whole roster change, what was your reaction?
I've heard a decent amount about behind the scenes of EG, and it sounded kind of like they just had too many strong personalities. I think Sumail and Artur kind of, I don't want to say they were like at ends with each other or anything like that, but they both had very flashy, be the winning player for your team mentality. And I think that these replacements for EG might help that. Ramses, I guess, played at 3 position before he played 1 position for Virtus Pro. I always have my skepticism about players who are going to new roles or roles they haven't played recently. But the fact that he's played that role before on teams gives me a little more confidence on that. And I know Abed's a much more laid back, pretty much say nothing during the game, just kind of do his own thing. Well, there's these players that just show up in the right place at the right time all the time. Like Universe is an offlaner that comes to mind for me that does that, and Abed's a mid laner that does that. So I think that they tried to go for more of this balance of personalities because it just doesn't matter always about the skill, right? And we see last year, as you said, this roster of EG that kind of came together right before TI8, so they gave it this extra year to see if they could make it happen. There has to be something wrong if each individual player is like incredibly strong at their role. So with that in mind, obviously Abed and Ramsey's two very top tier players. Abed obviously had a little bit of a not the showing you wanted as TI8, TI9, but that doesn't really take any. He's widely regarded as the best mid laner in SCA.
Yeah, from Southeast Asia at least, and certainly one of the best in the world. So for me, it was. I've been saying this even going back to last year when they initially made those changes, as you pointed out, going into TI8. It was kind of a last-minute change, so yeah, it was hard to really judge how the roster was going to be. They gave it another season. Obviously, didn't work out in the long run here, but for me, it was either Arteezy or Sumail had to go. It was EG had to rebuild around one of those players. Who they chose, ultimately is up to them, and clearly they ultimately went with Arteezy. But I bring that up because I feel like they do obviously have very similar play styles. They are both these players that ideally you want to play around them. You look at a team like Liquid, they're playing around Miracle. You look at a team like OG, they're playing around Ana for the most part. So I feel like if you're truly looking to win TI, the recent success at least has been built around you have that absolute one-star player and then a great supporting cast ultimately around him. When you have Arteezy and Sumail on the same team, I just didn't think it was going to work out ultimately in the long run, and we saw that here throughout the last couple of seasons. So with that in mind, I personally do have my concerns with Abed joining the ranks. Abed, a very good player, but I feel like he is a similar player in a lot of ways to a Sumail. He is going to bring this. Not necessarily, he's not going to be about me, kind of player, but I'm a little worried that he is used to being the focus and the carry of his team in that mid role. So will there be enough farm to share? Will there be enough room for these two players? I don't know if I'm necessarily sold on that, and this being the best replacement for Sununa. As great of a player he is, that is my ultimate concern with EG, and I feel like has been their weakness in this past couple of years in terms of not being able to ultimately win TI.
Yeah, Abed definitely has a share of playmakers that he plays, but he also plays these 10th pick meepos, right? Kind of like you're saying, where you build around these heroes that are the win condition for you in that specific game. And that does create some hesitation from me as well. I was kind of thinking about that, but at the same time, I know Abed is really good at these heroes like DK, these enabling type heroes from the mid lane. So maybe they're going to mix it up and pick him more of these conservative, make sure they do their own thing. But they can still be flashy. These heroes can still make use of a skill level player like he has. And Ramsey's, I think, also is a lot different player than S4. Like S4, yeah, he's a very good player, but Ramsey's is known for his aggression. Even when he was a carry player, like when I watched his replays from the carry position, he's the guy that's just up in your face. He'll die 3 times in the first 10 minutes if that means he drew 4 people to his lane. And he played that way from the carry position.
Is that good as an off lane? I mean, that's to your point. Is that actually, does that translate well to an off lane, you think?
I think it does. What I'm saying is S4 was kind of this mid. He had this mid player mindset from the off lane, even though he played these off lane heroes. I think they didn't really have somebody that was willing to just die for the sake of helping the team. And I know that sounds weird because it's not just mindless feeding, right? It's feeding with a purpose. Like you're forcing people to respond to you. You're creating a lot of pressure. You're like forcing the attention to yourself rather than the person that you're trying to have be the win condition for your team. And I just think based on what I saw from the carry role that he could easily translate that to the off lane. And I think they needed a player like that for the team because like you said, is there enough farm on the map?
Yeah.
And I think that Ramsey's it's all hit or miss, right? With these new rosters, you never know how the dominoes are going to fall into place or whatever. But I think Ramsey's is a big deal for like Abed, kind of a neutral shift from Sumail. Hopefully, it's just there's no history there, so they can kind of start fresh. And then with Ramsey's, it's just I think the play style is a big difference for them. And obviously, since the remaining, like the support cast, I think is very strong. Crit and Fly. I think that this team has higher potential than the last one, but as any other new roster go, they could just dud We'll just have to see.
You
never know how it happens.
Well, that kind of leads nicely into the expectations of this team. I think it's fair to say I don't want to go as far as saying they need to win TI, because that's kind of ridiculous to say a team needs to win TI to live up to expectations when only one team does, and it's just a crazy tournament. But they need to be the number one team out of NA, no doubt, and a top 3 finish, I think, is clearly what this team is aiming for from the organization perspective, in terms of, I'm sure they're paying them a good salary. This is a legit, serious organization when it comes to competing in esports, let alone Dota 2. They're here to compete, and that's why they made these changes. So I think it's fair to say a top 3 at TI / number 1 NA team is the expectations that we should see from them.
For sure. I think at least 1 or 2 majors for them. At the bare minimum. I think that last year EG's main problem was they just don't win. Like they always place high, right? But they just don't win.
Third place curse, man.
Yeah, everyone memes about it, but at the end of the day, these players, they have confidence issues in terms of they trash talk each other in a competitively friendly way, but it gets to you after a while if you just keep losing to the same teams over and over again. And as an organization, even though they won some side tournaments, they need to win a DPC event, and they need to go into TI with that swagger almost, I think. And that's going to be an important part for their season. So I'm excited to see this new EG. I think they will be the best team in NA, but when it comes down to how well they actually perform in majors, that's what we'll really have to see.
NA is looking very interesting. We'll talk a little bit more about a couple of these other rosters in a second, but I think the next roster to transition to discuss is going over to the European region in NIP. Ninjas in Pajamas, PPD, a new squad across the board. You're looking at Oliver in their 1, Gunnar in their 2, Universe as their 3, and Biver as their 4. So a mix of players from all over the place. Gunnar, of course, a North American player, had the interesting story last season. I'm sure you know him pretty well yourself. But NIP, this is not a roster I personally expected, especially coming from the roster of last season. It's fair to say that they were fairly disappointed in their results last season when it comes to PPD, especially captaining a team. Do you think that this is a team that you would have higher expectations out of this season?
Well, even though it seems like a smorgasbord of players, I did a little backtracking, and Oliver and Biver, they played together for about the last year. They played on Team Spirit, and then they did make their brief stint to Infamous. So these 2 players are familiar with one another. And then obviously you have TI5 EG with Universe as well as PPD, and then Gunnar. The funny thing I talked to PPD at TI, and he just said, going into last season, there's just no mid laners left. And they just took Fada. Fada's a good player, but he's not a mid laner, right? And it makes it really hard as a drafter, as a team, when you almost expect to lose mid lane. And then there's also times where you want to pick this flashy game winning hero, but it just can't come from the mid lane because you don't have a genuine mid player. Just, the real deal from the mid lane. These skilled players that just do crazy things that just win you the game sometimes. And let me tell you, if there's one thing, Gunnar seems like an incredibly passive guy. Just seems like this quiet guy that just does his own thing. No, this kid is nuts. He's actually nuts. I've played with him on Party Stacks a pretty good amount. And you're just farming in the mid lane, and he's a Monkey King jumping around trees in the mid lane. And he's like, I'm going in. And I'm like, what? And he just jumps into their Ancients into 4 heroes blind. And I'm like, what are you doing? And then
5-head moment.
Then we just take a fight and win, and he just has this raw ability that a lot of mid laners need, and also a lot of them lack, to just recognize the time to just go in, make a big balls, big move play. And I think that's exactly what somebody like PPD needs on his team. And I think that Gunnar as a player, being unrefined, still new to the scene, is who PPD needs. He needs PPD. Okay. I think they needed each other in this team. And obviously I think Universe is one of the best players in the world, even though he didn't, he wasn't able to be on a team for TI9. Yeah. So I have a lot higher expectations of this NIP than I did the previous one, because even though the previous one had good individual players, I don't think they really had the summation of factors that it takes to make a good team. So I'm really looking forward to seeing this team make a splash in the in the European region, even though that region is very tough.
That's the problem, right? Europe, you could argue, is at the top end the toughest region in all the regions, maybe outside of China or whatever, but it is certainly very difficult, as is shown, especially in the last part of the season. Going back to your Gunnar point, is it fair to say it kind of reminds you of a little bit of CCNC? Obviously, PPD played with him a couple seasons ago with Optic Gaming and, helped develop him, and we see where he's at today, and talk about him in just a second more, but do you see Gunnar in a similar spot, or is he a more refined player to you, a more aggressive player even?
I think they're different players, but in terms of the spot they were in their career, I think Gunnar's just a year behind. I think that, he is – I just liked his attitude the whole way. I did miss a chance to play with him last year, and I do regret it. Like, I had a choice between playing with him or – I'm not going to mention the other player. But we chose to go with the other player, and, looking back, it's obviously one of those, I wish I had gotten to play with him. Mm-hmm. He's just unique, and I think that's really important in the Dota scene. It's really hard to read. It's really hard to draft around as an opponent. I think his main limitation right now is he only has maybe 5 to 10 heroes that he can play at the absolute highest level.
Okay.
But him as a player with the attitude he has, I know for a fact over the course of this year that he will expand upon that. If PPD says, hey, Gunnar, man, I need you to be able to play Medusa better than anyone in the world. But the Gunnar's like, okay, I'll play 100 games of Medusa. He's just that type of player. Like, if you ask him to do something, if he needs to do something for the team, he's going to do it. And it's seems like such an important mindset that you should be like, yeah, shouldn't everyone just have that? That's what everyone should have. But no, that's not the case.
It's easier said than done. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially from the mid lane, right? These players are very cocky. They're very flashy. And he has that. And that's what I love about his attitude. So I have high hopes for this kid. And I am rooting for him. He's a likable guy.
Yeah.
And this team is just Gunnar and Universe are just likable guys. I don't know Oliver and Biver personally, but they've always been solid in my mind whenever I've seen them. I've never been like, wow, those guys suck or anything like that. And obviously PPD is the type of leader that any team needs to make it happen.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, he brings the experience, of course, and he's been there before, and he has definitely matured over the years, too. And you talk about Biver, I have history with him, but he is actually a former Han player. He's an old-school Han player, but you come to the Dota days, and he has been on some big names. You mentioned Team Spirit. Before that, he was on Na'Vi, so this guy knows how to play for some big organizations, brings the experience, and I can vouch he is a good guy as well. So definitely, nice. They got that going for them as NIP, but being good guys doesn't always translate to success necessarily. There is more to it, of course. So PPD going to try to put them in shape. And when it comes to expectations for me, again, this is the European region we're talking about. I think it's fair to say qualifying for several minors throughout the season, at least qualifying for one major is certainly, I think, a good place to start for a team like this. It's a very tough region. I keep reiterating that for good reason. But I think qualifying for at least one major is what I would see out of them.
I expect at least one major as well, and I think if they make it to the major, it's all going to be about how it comes together for Gunnar. I think, even though I talked praise about him, every new mid laner is just so hit or miss. And will he be the CCNC that Optic had, where they kind of just become this consistent 8th place team, or will he become that next level? And that's the question. So we'll just have to see. That's the deciding factor for me over the course of the season.
Fair enough. Keeping things moving along. So jumping over back to the NA region, the region we both know and love pretty well. J-Storm. J-Storm has been through a couple of changes. Their new roster, you're looking at Resolution, 9 joining the ranks as their mid player. Moo in the offlane now. Moose as their position 4, of course, South American player, and then Fear. Big Daddy Fear going in the position 5. As a caster, I do not like seeing Moo and Moose on the same team, but that's neither here or there. 9, for me personally, in the last couple of years, he's kind of been one of these up-and-coming players, I think it's fair to say. He's always been very high-ranked when it comes to his ladder play in the European region. Hasn't necessarily been on the top of tier teams. I think this is truly his first big break in being able to play from J-Storm from the beginning. So I'm very intrigued to see how he does when it comes to playing in the North American region. But obviously, this is a team filled with experience, and you got a player like Resolution. You certainly should have some higher expectations of them. But is this a roster you see coming together pretty well?
Sadly, I don't. This is a team that has to prove me wrong. They have to. I have low expectations for this team because last year J-Storm They do have 4 of the same players, right? Obviously, Fear moved from 4 to 5. They booted the 5 player. They kind of rotated between 5 players last year, and they added Moose to the team. And I guess 9 was added maybe midway through the season, but 9 is a player I've talked about time and time again, incredibly skilled laner. And then for whatever reason, his mid game, his like aggression and application of his advantage in pro matches just doesn't translate. I don't know why. These types of players, I really never understand why certain things go wrong for them. But he gains his advantage, and then the momentum just dies somewhere around 15 to 20 minutes. And that's why when I look at a player like Gunnar, I'm like, I don't know what makes him successful in this aggressive role, but someone like 9, I look at and I'm like, how is this guy so high ranked, always wins his lane, or at least goes even in a bad matchup, and then his mid game looks like this? It always confuses me. And this team just didn't look like it just didn't look like the summation of the factors like I talked about in the other team. Just didn't look that much last year. J-Storm was very disappointing last year, and they only changed 1 player. So I believe in the individual talent of these players, like Resolution, obviously top tier carry player, Move, top tier NA offlaner, Fear, TI winning support, but he's also never been really a captain. A lot of question marks for this team. I think Moose is one of the best players from SA that I've seen. He is in my pubs a lot, and I do enjoy playing with him on my team. I'm just going to say I'm skeptical. This team, out of all of the teams we probably have here, I have the lowest expectations for, but I'm willing to be proven wrong.
That's fair. Definitely making some changes. Moo's a solid player. You know, you look at how well they did last season. They came up just shy in the TI qualifiers, losing a forward game, and of course, in the grand finals right there. So not a lot of changes going into this season, but a team with Resolution, I would like to think I have some higher expectations for in terms of it coming together. So it is tough for me too, because I'm looking at some of these other squads in the North American region that are forming, and to see J-Storm as a team that you would expect to beat them. Obviously, we've already talked about EG. Certainly don't expect that. And a couple of these other ones, I don't know. I think qualifying for maybe a minor or two is probably the highest we should expect out of this team. But qualifying for a major would be a bit of a stretch, in my opinion. So.
But the NA region, as far as the memes go, it is still pretty bad. So maybe J-Storm can get that experience they need in the majors by qualifying and then come together as a team over the course of the season. They did prove last year that they're willing to stay together as a unit. So that does bode better than some of these other rosters that we maybe seeing coming up here.
I want to stick with the NA region, might as well, since we are talking about it. Now, this next one is, to be clear, hasn't been confirmed 100% yet. There is a good reason to believe that likely this could be a roster to expect, as there are some leaked screenshots of it. There's been more and more people talking about it, but this is Sumail's new team, obviously, with his announcement of the departure from EG. Everyone's talking about where the hell is he going to end up, for good reason. Apparently, he's going to be playing with his brother, potentially, as we're looking at Sumail, CCNC, SVG, Yawar, and MSS. So you got 2 very experienced players in SVG and MSS. Definitely a good leadership role there. Yawar and Sumail, the brothers, and then CCNC in position 2. So Sumail, in this case, would be kind of that position 1. Now, it could be interchangeable, obviously, kind of like a Liquid-esque style, where they can change depending on the heroes picked. But that's the well, not the expectation, but what people believe is going to be the roster. Again, no official word yet, but that's a sexy roster, man. I mean, those are some big-name players, and that certainly is a team that, if it connects, they could contest even with an EG, you'd feel.
Yeah, this is TI8, why am I blanking? VGJ with Sumail as the carry. I think that this team has a lot of potential. Obviously, Yawar in an offlane is a little of a wild card for me. I've never seen him play offlane. I've seen him play it recently. But I just want to confirm that I'm about 99% sure this roster is correct. Okay. I was party queuing with SVG and Sumail the other day, and SVG's like, Sumail, don't go mid. I wanted you to lane with me for obvious reasons. And I'm like, what are those reasons, SVG? He's like, I guess they're not so obvious. And Sumail and Yawar have been party queuing literally every day together. So I have to assume that other than CCNC, which I would expect based on who's left in the mid lane in NA, all the rest of it's 100% confirmed. I think that this roster, these players are all very good. So I expect this to be the second best team in NA.
Yeah,
That's simple for me.
multiple majors. Certainly, I could see this team qualifying for, and that's a good. I didn't even think about that. With actually, this is pretty much VGJ Storm, like you said, with Sumail as the fifth player. I'm swapping around roles a little bit, but kind of a side question. Just thought about this. Obviously, you got Sumail and Yawar brothers. There are a couple of other brother combos. We got Chessie and Limp come to mind. We got Z Freak and Kyle, of course, come to mind. And I don't know if there's any I'm missing off the top of my head, but. Is it fair to say Sumail and Yawar probably on the top of the list as far as brother combos?
Yeah, I'm surprised they've never made an attempt at playing together in the past. I think Yawar was kind of a few steps behind Sumail in his career path, but I think he's come a long way as a player. And just to clarify about VGJ, I guess CCNC wasn't on that, but he's played with MSS and Yawar a lot over the course of the years with like Team Freedom and stuff. So it's basically TI8 VGJ with players that have played together a ton. And that's the big thing for me is even though this is a new roster, these players have played together a lot. And that's really important, I think, for team chemistry. They get along. It's not going to be one of those just beef stacks where they stack and then they beef one another and then break up. I really do have high expectations.
What organization is going to pick up this team, too? That's another question, man, because obviously this is some high-profile players, and there's been rumors, even things like the Cloud9 coming back. You would think it's certainly potential to be a pretty big organization in the esports world, so I'm excited for that and see what it brings to the table. But definitely some higher expectations there, if indeed that is 100% confident in the roster. Sticking with NA, another kind of makeup of players coming together. They're always interesting. Eternal Envy going to be forming up with Bryle, Moon Meander, Snake King, and Owie 2000. So a couple of interesting storylines there. You got Eternal Envy, of course, and his history. See a little smirk coming out right there. Yes, it's always fun to talk about. Owie, it's been a while since he's really been competitive in Dota 2. But then you have players like Snake King with a ton of experience recently. I don't know. Where are you at with this squad?
My opinion of this squad is I believe Moon Meander, Snake King, very good players. I think Owie knows a lot about the game, so he's kind of a hit or miss for the captain role. I've just never seen him do it. Never been too impressed with Bryle in the mid lane, but I think he's the next best after all the ones that are already taken. So I do believe this is like their best candidate for the mid lane. But I think you can color me surprised if this team lasts longer than a couple months. There are some volatile personalities on this team. I don't want to call anyone out, but
up to you.
I'd say multiple players on this team have had issues personality-wise. It's not been play that they get kicked from teams or that teams move on without them. We talked about EG having too many personalities last year. This is like personalities on steroids. So we'll see. Maybe Owie can wrangle them all together to become one happy family. But I'm not convinced. So high skill stack that if they have initial success may go somewhere. But I would say with one moment of turmoil, this team's just going to implode. That's my opinion.
It's fair. I mean, it's happened many times before, so that's certainly not a stretch to go with right there. So I guess maybe our expectations for the squad is be the same 5-man roster at the end of the season. That's the hope, I suppose.
That's the end goal.
That's the goal.
That also implies success because that's
true.
the only way they're going to make it to that point.
That's true. I will say, again, on a personal level, I do want to see Moon Meander specifically have success. He's a great guy.
He's a good guy.
He's matured so much over the years, too, and it's been obviously again, going back to the Han days, I remember from that, and always been a good buddy of his from back then. So I'm hoping that there is some success, whether it's with this team or in the future for him. But yeah, it's not the highest expectations, I think it's fair to say, with this squad. So we start soon with the DPC, so who knows? But jumping over to another region, Singularity from the European region. This is a little bit lesser of a tier, I think is a fair point to make off the bat, but I found it a fairly interesting one to at least talk about. Excalibur in their position 1. You got Mage in their position 2, Saberlight as their 3, DNZ as their 4, and Pexu as their 5. So Excalibur, he's kind of been one of these mercenaries over the years. I like to put it where he's played for a lot of these different European teams, especially. He's even played for Fnatic in Southeast Asia. So he's been around the block. He's one of these players that looks always so good online at times, but then in his couple of LAN performances has unfortunately been underwhelming. And then you're also mixed with the several younger players like a Mage, a Saberlight. I have had the chance to actually cast this team with the covers that I've been doing here for the We Play tournament just this last week and these last couple of days. Spoiler alert, they just got knocked out, unfortunately. But they looked okay. They looked okay. It is a stacked European region. This is one of these teams that could you see them breaking through, or is there going to be work to be done?
Excalibur kind of reminds me of 9, just a really high-ranked pub player that has never really proven himself to have that translate over to competitive. And as far as all these other players go, they're just a bunch of unprovens to me, Yeah. And in the EU region, that's just a brutal place to be in that situation. And I think that for the most part, for me, this is a developmental year for almost all these players. And maybe they'll be able to sneak into 1 or 2 minors. But aside from that, I think that a lot of these players have upside potential, but I just also, like I said, they're unproven, and they're in a region where there's so many proven stacks that are just really powerful, or not already like made organizations that you're competing against. You got OG, you got Liquid, you got Secret, like you got this new NIP that I think has more promise than this team. And I just, that's rough, man. So I think, like I said, 1 or 2 minors would be awesome for this team.
Yeah,
if they can make it to that.
Yeah, I think maybe a minor is the expectation that we should probably look for as far as a team like this. But it's very tough. So we'll see how they come together. Yeah, we are getting a little bit long-winded here, so let's just talk about one more team, because this is another interesting one for me. As they're calling themselves, the Fata stack, again in a European region. You're looking at the roster of Nico Baby, Limp, 3-3, Hanskin, and Fata. Now, the interesting thing about this lineup, Fata is going to be going to position 5, apparently, with this squad. Nico Baby, of course, he's coming off of his high of TI9. He was one of these breakout players that certainly looked very good to a lot of people that I know I'm not alone to say I did not have any expectations, really, for him in the team, but looked very good, and I'm curious to see how he does now going back to the European region, where I believe he is from, after all. So, what do you think of this squad?
I think they made a lot of changes that they needed to make in terms of these individual players. I think Limp needed to leave complexity in the NA region. I think he needed to go back to EU. I think his style just doesn't fit NA. For whatever reason, it just doesn't look like his playstyle meshes with this region's type of play. He's a very aggressive mid laner, and I don't know, it just doesn't work here the way he plays. It's very technical, though. He's a very rigid but good at what he does kind of player. And then you have Fata, who I always thought his biggest strength was his knowledge of the game, and his biggest weakness was his mechanics. So I think moving to the 5 is very natural for him. A lot of players have done it from similar situations for him. I think 33 is one of the best offlaners in the scene. I think Hodgskin's a great 4 position, and Limp and him have played together a lot. And, Nico Baby, like you said, I think that this has a good balance of experience as well as newer players that are high skill in their individual roles. I like this stack a lot, and I think they could potentially qualify for 1 or 2 majors and are almost guaranteed to make all the minors. So I like this squad a lot.
All right. High expectations there as far as minor success, and certainly could see that. And again, a team in TFT that last season, they kept getting so close to qualifying for so many things, including TI9 itself, but they just came up short. So Hanskin, in that case specifically, I'm excited to see what he can do with this squad. And yeah, Limp, of course, from Sweden, and going back to the region, in the European region, to see how he does over there. So, a couple more things before we move on to topics altogether. It's worth pointing out, I think, that of the top teams, of a lot of these teams that rosters may be sticking together, well, let's kind of go down the list real quickly. You got OG, who has announced that they do plan to stick together. However, Ana may be taking a break yet again, and Thompson, I think, isn't planning to play until the second set of majors, so we are going to possibly see some stand-in situations there. Yep, what's that?
I said can't blame them there.
Right. It's great. I mean, every year we had it with Liquid a couple of years before. Now, of course, OG back-to-back years. It seems like it's a grind, man. it's a rough life when you're playing Dota like that at that level, especially. So it's understandable they want the break, but so we'll see. Yep.
I was just gonna say I would need a break if I put in that much work and then one TI. It's not just like the fact that you put in so much work. It's like the high of coming off of TI itself and the win, and then motivating yourself just to win a major. I don't know. That to me, I'm trying to even fathom what that would be.
Not many
like
people
in my
can.
head. And I definitely think you just need a deep breath, refresher, step mentally reset your mind for the new season. And it's just not enough time between TI and the first major to do that.
Another team on the list, one that we've already talked a little bit about, Virtus Pro. They're going through a lot of changes. Ramsey is, of course, now a part of EG. It was also announced, well, you have Pasha, now a part of Na'Vi even. So that's an interesting storyline right there. And so far, it's only apparently... God, who was it? It's going to be No One and Solo have announced that they plan to stick with Virtus Pro, so we don't even know about Roger either. He hasn't actually made any announcements yet. So it's likely going to be just those two players and rebuilding the squad. But man, this I was talking with my co-casters in this tournament I've been covering. It's been mainly the CIS region, even the Europe a little bit, but CIS is wide open this year, especially with Virtus Pro imploding. That region, the expectations, who the hell knows where that's going to go. So I think that's actually going to be a really fun storyline to pay attention to throughout the season, and pretty cool for the region, because the last 3 years, essentially, it's been almost really dominated by VP, and then it's like you got one other team, whoever it may be. So I am excited for that. But yeah, and then who's going to join VP, right? We don't know that yet. So there's still even more of this to come. So, but yeah, your take on that quickly?
Yeah, with a team like VP being so dominant in that region, it's funny to see it. Like, with EG, they've broken down and reformed already. With VP, you have no idea. And I just love it now, region, what are new teams going to move there? Are some European teams just going to migrate because now they see this big opening? There's always only really one or two slots max from that region, but suddenly one slot that was almost taken or was taken every single major is not taken anymore, guaranteed. We'll just have to see. Obviously, No One and Solo are insanely good players, so maybe VP will still be dominant, but they haven't proven that yet. So maybe the first major, we might be seeing some crazy stuff. And I like that. I like the unpredictability of professional Dota at any point at the beginning of the season, especially with all these new rosters and the biggest teams kind of reforming, and they don't always look in peak form, right? That's why sometimes you'll see these kind of tier 2, tier 3 teams making a huge run at the start of the season, because of this exact reason. Yeah,
there's only been a couple of teams that we kind of know is planning to stick together, and that's kind of OG, as we talked about. It's kind of Liquid. They may not. They may be replacing a We. They obviously left the organization, so they're no longer known as Liquid, and we're going to see what they do. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think, is there another team? Because Secret's another one. We actually haven't heard anything from Secret.
Yeah.
So we don't know where they're going to end up. You would assume with their success last season, maybe a little disappointing, of course, at TI9 with their ultimate result, but had a fantastic, the best regular season, really, of all the teams. So sticking together wouldn't be the most surprising. But again, the fact that we're here, almost the first minor qualifiers about to start, or major qualifiers even, and we haven't heard yet, is another interesting take there. So there really isn't a top-tier team even out there. I think the China region does have a couple, actually. I think LGD has announced they're sticking together 100%. But outside of that, there really isn't there's not a lot. There's been at least one, if not multiple, roster changes on all these squads.
Yeah, the chaos is going to come together at some point, but it definitely is not formulated just yet.
It's great, man. It's great stuff. And obviously, again, starting in a couple of weeks, we got the major qualifiers. We'll get not only an idea of what some of these rosters even continue to look like, but how they perform and maybe the expectations out of them moving forward. And that's going to be something, again, on this weekly podcast we'll pay attention to, discuss, and looking forward to doing. Okay, enough about roster shuffle, though. I do want to keep things moving right here. A couple more things to talk about before we do start to wrap things up. And the first big thing is, of course, we keep mentioning the season is about to start, that being the DPC season. This is the third year? Yeah, this is the third year that we've officially ran a DPC season. And overall, I think it's fair to say it's gone fairly well. It definitely made a dramatic change from the first to the second season. We had 25 events from the first season, and then it, of course, went down to 10 events there. But it's going to be the same thing this time around. You got the 5 minors, you got the 5 majors. Not a lot changed this year. One of the biggest ones, though, was the fact that they're combining the qualifiers. Instead of having a major qualifier, and then if you don't qualify, you then play a whole new minor qualifier, they're just saying we're all going to take, the teams from that one qualifier, either for the major or the minor. So this means the schedule can be a little less compact and a little more time in between. And, a player like yourself, I'm sure you can appreciate that when it comes to the grind.
Absolutely. I think the fact that they not only changed that, but they also changed the format of the qualifiers. So every qualifier is going to be with 2 best-of-2 groups of 5, where the top 2 teams from each group will go to a playoff to decide who goes to the major, and the third-place teams will go to like this other phase, who then decides to go to the minor. And I think it's a cool concept that they are giving teams a longer break. This set of qualifiers seems like it's more consistent, meaning since it's not this playoff style bracket, the better teams will more likely go. So if you're one of the best teams, you're not as concerned about not qualifying in some fluke series of a best of 3. It's pretty hard to consistently lose to inferior teams in best of 2s throughout a group stage. It's almost always like in a group stage format, the best teams always end up getting into that. At the TI where Virtus Pro barely made it into the upper bracket, even though they completely flopped out. It's like these teams that look sketchy throughout the group stage will still be able to make the top half, or whatever the cutoff is that they have to make if they are one of the best quality teams. And the other attempt that they made to change was that they evenly distributed the prize pool money for the minor. And everyone talks about the support for the tier 2 scene. I think this is a nice step, but it's just not enough. If you have 5 minors throughout the season, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to qualify for a minor as a player, right? That there's 8 teams in the minor, 16 in the major. That's 24 teams, 120 players throughout the entire world. So if you're in your own region, that means you have to be top 20 in your own region as a ranked player on average to even make it into a minor. And then if you get last place in the minor, you're making $12,000. So
for the team, yeah.
For the team. So you're making $2,400. So then if you make it to every minor, you are going to make $12,000 on the year, which is
not usually the best. It's not.
You're putting in a lot of time, right? We talked about the grind.
Yeah.
So for me, the biggest issue I had last year with the DPC season, they've addressed a lot of the issues, the lack of breaks, and the way the qualifiers went in general was a problem. But it's so hard when a team like TFT last year talks about possibly having to give up their pro Dota careers because of the fact that they just don't make any money.
They just kept coming up short, yeah.
Yeah, and they're one game off of TI, or one series off of TI. And it's just, for me, that's the biggest issue. And this new system looks better, as it does every year, but it doesn't look like it addressed the core issue that I think will be the downfall of competitive Dota, if there ever is one, which is the lack of tier 2 scene, which just doesn't promote new players, growth, and that kind of thing. So
yeah, no, that's a whole another topic, and we could definitely talk about that on another show as far as a longer discussion. But the quick take on that for me is just it's complicated. There's obviously a lot to it from the tournament organizers themselves. It's
absolutely,
but there has been some suggestions, just the simple of take $1 million from the prize pool of TI and instead spread that out throughout the year, whatever. But there's even other sides to that, devil's advocate, you can play that. So, but yeah, we'll have that discussion certainly in a later on show. So I like the tease right there, Mr.
Yeah,
BSJ.
absolutely. I know we were mainly talking about DPC, but this is the system that is supposed to address that problem. So
yeah, that's fair.
Nice segue into future episodes.
That is definitely fair. It's when you do the math, it certainly doesn't add up the craziest. For even a top 20 player in that specific region. But again, a discussion for another time, so we'll save it for that. But certainly very interesting. Like we talked about, there were a couple of changes. As far as the format goes, real quickly, I still do not understand why we do not see a Swiss format. I mean, as a player yourself, is that something that you would like to see? Because what was it, like 2 years ago, there was a major. I think it was like a Kiev major. This was actually before the DPC, so maybe like 3 years ago. But they ran a Swiss format, and I thought it went very well. The reaction to it seemed pretty good. We haven't had one since then in a relevant tournament, so I don't understand really why. I haven't heard a good explanation just yet. You seem a little lost
yourself. It seems like one of the most consistent formats, if not the most consistent. I'm not sure why. There's so much that goes into a Dota team that I can't even imagine what goes into organizing Dota tournaments, that in terms of sponsorships, in terms of you're trying to maximize airtime, in terms of, all types of stuff. When it comes to mysteries like that, I actually have no input because I'm on the outside looking at it. I'm like, that just makes so much sense to do, yet all these people aren't doing it. So why? And there's just so many unfathomable reasons that it could be that I just give up. I'm like, I can't think of why. So I'd have to hear it from them. And, as of now, it's kind of been an undiscussed topic. So.
Yeah. They are going with the GSO format. In the majors there, 4 best of 3 is the top 2 move on to the upper bracket, bottom 2 move to the lower bracket. So I mean, I think that's at least fine. But again, you've had some tournaments that have done some funky formats and teams getting eliminated after 3 games in total that they played. So it's kind of ridiculous. But I suppose this is better than something like that. But yeah, I would have at least liked to see a Swiss format at one of these events. But
maybe try it out for sure.
Yeah. Maybe a non-DPC event can come through. We'll see. Obviously, a little bit more time for such events, which is kind of cool, too, these third-party tournaments, because of the scheduling, and that's another side effect of having the qualifiers all together rather than spread out. So that is another benefit as well, worth mentioning on top of that. But new DPC season is here. It's going to be starting, again, October 5th, I believe, is is day number 1 of the qualifiers for that first major/minor. So a couple of weeks away here as you're listening to this podcast, and cannot wait for that to be just around the corner. All right, let's talk about quickly going over Midas mode going on. It just started earlier today as we're recording this podcast. Midas mode, I don't know if you saw the introduction, but even Lord Gaben is backing up this tournament. They actually had the introduction, and he did a bit on his phone where he said, "Welcome to Midas mode," like he does for TI.
I did not see that.
They actually got Gaben himself to do it. So
wow,
it's amazing what Slacks can do, man. It really is.
Slacks has some serious influence in the Dota scene. He's just a good guy, and everyone in the Dota scene knows that he's just trying to make Dota a beautiful esport. And so I think that he gets a lot of more assistance than another person would get, just because everyone has faith in him as a community member. And I've been wanting to watch Midas mode. I'm definitely going to watch some of it back today. I obviously heard that there were some serious issues in terms of bugs. Apparently there was a beyond godlike Timbersaw that gave 97 gold to
the gold was an issue,
when he died. So for whatever reason, something with their new system was causing that to happen. But we talk about what teams are we most excited to see here. And when I watched the team announcement video, I was so hyped for almost like, they're like, yeah, we managed to scrape together these teams. I laughed so hard. Right when they said that, I assumed that there was going to be some seriously stacked rosters. And obviously you have these amazing teams like OG in the tournament, but the memes, man, they really embraced it. I was most excited to see the meme squads, whether it be the streamer stack, though, was it Sadim's assassins or something like that they called them, and then from the
Sursadim Stunners.
Sursadim Stunners. I just want to see how that team came together, just for fun to watch them. Also, there's so many viewers that are emotionally invested in the streamers they like to watch. Mm-hmm. And then the TI1 and TI3 Alliance and Navi stacks. I was the mainly probably the Navi one, because the whole Puppy Dendy reunion thing is just so funny. I don't know how they managed to pull that off. How do they get these players just be like, yeah, we'll come play with you for this
Why
tournament?
not? Yeah.
From a spectator's perspective, it's yeah, that's so cool. That's awesome. But logistically, how did they get these players to come together to play this tournament? Even the Burning Squad, you're like, how did he, how did they convince these guys to just take 5 days out of their time to just go play this kind of joke of a tournament, in terms of the fact that it's not actual Dota, but at the same time it's being taken seriously. It's just such a beautiful thing for
esports. You know,
It is.
In real sports, how often you get to see something like this. And esports alone, like there's no other esport that's as cool as Dota. And this is something that really, for me, drives that home. Like all these teams I'm so excited for. So I love the Midas Mode tournament. I think the production behind it's hilarious. And I think that the fact that the players and teams are able to buy into the lighthearted atmosphere when Dota is such a diehard game in general, the environment around it, it's just such a cool thing to see.
It is, and that's what I was going to get at too. I think it's very healthy. You know, you have those odd people even out there that suggest, like, you know, just keep Dota tournaments to how it should be played. And it's just like, shut up, Frank. You know, it's fun. It's fun to have these events, and the fact that you do have players like Dendy as well as Puppy playing together. I mean, I think that really shows, and the double TI champions OG going to be playing in it. Like, it shows that they like playing the game. They play a lot of just the serious mode Dota 2. Sometimes it's just fun to play the lighthearted mode, such as a Midas mode right here. And for those that don't know what Midas mode is, it would take like 30 minutes to explain it here on the cast, so not going to do that. You can obviously check it out, but again, it is a very, very, very unique game within Dota 2. It is kind of Dota 2, but not really. So I do recommend checking it out as kind of a fun way to watch some Dota. As fun, kind of a fun way to segue into the Dota 2 season, especially with the timing of it. So that started earlier today. It's going to be going on throughout the week and into our next podcast even. So we'll have more to talk about it then. As far as how it wrapped up, well, I think rather than going over the last segment there, we did draw a little bit long, so we are going to go ahead and look to start wrapping it up here on the show. But obviously got plenty to talk about, including a lot of the reshuffle news that's been happening with the roster, and there's still so much more to come. I'm sure by next week's show, there will be even more news. We mentioned teams like Secret, Liquid, and no longer Liquid, but where are they going to end up? The new Virtus Pro Squad. There's some big-name teams and even some big-name players that are still out there. We do not know where they're going to be. So that'll be exciting, but we are officially looking to wrap up episode number 1. So BSJ, you made it. Congratulations. Made it through the show. I think you did a fantastic job, if I say so myself. But any shout-outs, any last words before? Well, I know.
Oh, yeah. We got a lot of information coming in today, but it's 12 days until the first qualifier. And like you said, there's so much up in the air that even though we're doing this once every week, I can't even imagine what we're not going to know yet by the time we get to next week. So yeah. I love this time of the season. It's always the chaos, and that kind of, like we said, eventually it all sorts itself out and you're like, wow, that's obvious that I was going to play like that. But for now, there's so much thrown up in the air, and just go enjoy Midas Mode. Yeah, I really do want to give a shout out to that tournament. Just amazing thing for esports in general, just the idea of it. And thank you for having me here. I'm really excited to continue this podcast. So.
Yep. Thanks for joining me as a co-host, and hopefully you guys tuning in, both either on the live stream here on Twitch or listening on iTunes or even Spotify. We do thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Pass on the word. This is going to be a weekly podcast show. Again, this one happened to be live recorded on Tuesday, but in the future, it will be live recorded on Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern is the game plan. So look forward to it then, and then later on in the week, I believe by tomorrow, so like the next day, it should be up on, again, the podcast platforms, iTunes, Spotify, etc. to check out. So wherever you're listening to / watching, we thank you for tuning in. This was episode number 1 of the Wombo Combo podcast here, brought to you by Predictions. Thank you once again. I'm BreakyCPK. Was joined by BSJ as my co-commentator. Until next time, we'll see you then.